So my name is Darren Gertis, and I'm a professor who reviews the news on Ukraine every day. And if you're interested in staying up on this, if you're the kind of person that cares about Ukraine, please consider subscribing. And today what we're going to talk about are all the political considerations. While some things are happening on the ground, there's not enough movement that I want to talk about that. I want to talk only about the political today. Watch reporting from Ukraine, watch Dennis Davdov if you want to see that. But right now, I need to focus on a number of political events that are important for you to understand what's going on in Ukraine. So we're going to start here. Here is the yesterday I talked about how the SBU detained the president of Motor Sich for traitorous activity, and we talked about that. That was back to back with someone who looked like they were embezzling from the central bank. But this particular situation gets even worse. So there was a Guardian article today talking about how they phone tapped him and they found out what was really going on. Alleged recordings of the head of the major Ukrainian aircraft manufacturer accused of aiding the Russian military. He says, "I completely understand," when he's in a phone call when the Russians bombed part of his factory. And so he was kind of in on it, right? Here we have, if Putin is finished off, then nationalists will finish us off. And Iskander fell on the territory of the factory. We have absolutely no negative feelings about it. We completely understand. Okay, so there is a fraction of the population that is still pro-Russian. Now that percentage has dwindled radically. If you look at polling, what you'll see is that it was in double digits on the territories that bordered Russia. And those double digits has fallen off drastically into single digits, but there are still some, and this guy is one example of those that were collaborating. And the article continued and said, Boguslav is one of dozens of Ukrainians in powerful positions that have been charged with treason since 2014. Zelensky even sacked his intelligence chief, a childhood friend, Ihor Bankanov, for failing to rid the country's security services of Russian collaborators. So there were still enough that were leaning that direction, that this is a legitimate threat and a real story. He was selling engine parts and plane parts to Russia, who was then using them to attack Ukraine. So yeah, that it was bad. Okay, now Irish tea. I've not known a lot about Irish tea or heard a lot of Irish tea, but you're going to hear more about Irish tea in the future. Prime Minister of Ukraine, Denis Shmyhal, declares the effectiveness of this military equipment from the Germans. It's called Irish tea. It shot down 9 out of 10 missiles. Not bad. And so until other air defense gets put in place in a significant way, you're going to, I think, hear more about Irish tea. Okay, at the same time, the U.S. is considering providing the Hawk Air Defense System. The Hawk Air Defense System is an older system that it's an upgrade from the Stinger system, but it's the predecessor to the Patriot system. It is the generation just before Patriot, and having that would be a huge step forward for Ukraine, and I think the Biden administration is leaning toward providing that. International Monetary Fund is working right now to try to determine what the financing needs will be in 2023 for Ukraine, and they're working at how much, how many billions monthly. Should destruction of Ukraine infrastructure continue, it can reach up to $5 billion monthly. Right now, they need $5 billion a month. They were hoping it would be less in 2023, but apparently Putin had other plans with sending $2 million missiles at power plants. So the bill can continue to go up, but they are working on that even now. Zelensky calls on the EU to create a financial Ramstein. What he means by Ramstein is where the military heads get together to talk about Ukraine's needs. It's more complex than that, but basically that's the idea. So we need a financial version of that, and we're talking about the same thing. This is what Ukraine needs to survive. The weight of our rapid recovery plan is $17 billion immediately. Now, he says we haven't received a single cent of that 17 billion yet, and so he's asking for this to be stepped up. Okay, he says he defends. Now, this I just realized the enormity of this. Today is exactly 8 months of full-scale war. What has been achieved? Now, remember, it was the 24th of February when this started, so that's right. We're now in the 9th month of the full-scale war. We have defended the independence of our state, and Russia cannot change that. Yeah, that's right. Okay, Ukraine is breaking the so-called second army of the world, and from now on, Russia will only be a beggar. According to Zelensky, Russian potential is being wasted now on this madness, a war against our state and the entire free world. There was gas influence, not anymore. Military influence is evaporating. Now that's a really important point too, because when the war started, like we all looked at it like, whoa, Russia's invading. Like Ukraine doesn't stand a chance. They're a third the size in population, military strength are even smaller, and whatever. And it's almost like a full-grown adult going to a elementary school and picking on a little second grade girl. I mean, I don't, please don't take that offensively if you're Ukrainian, but that's what the disproportionate size looked like. And then the girl just fought back like a banshee, and like it wouldn't be a great victory for the full-grown man to beat up the little kid, but it is a pretty significant victory for the kid to hold its own against the full-grown man and be able to fight back in such an amazing way. There was political weight, and now there's increasing isolation. There were ideological ambitions, and now there's only disgust. And I think he just has such a knack for turning phrases in the right way to make his points. He's really a brilliant orator. Okay, in Great Britain, Sunak is appointed the UK Prime Minister. Liz Truss lasted for 44 or 46 days, something like that, and she's out. So Sunak is now in charge, and the Kremlin says it expects no positive change. Now, this is important for a particular reason. When we get to fun with Russian state media, you're going to see why. So the newly appointed British Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, has vowed to support Ukraine on the conclusion of the battle to repelling invading Russian troops, as the Kremlin sees no grounds for positive shift. Former finance minister, this paragraph packed in a lot. He's a former finance minister, a Hindu. He was invited to form a government by King Charles, that's King Charles III, this is his first big appointment, on October 25th, becoming the United Kingdom's first leader of color and its youngest prime minister in 2 centuries. Now, this is the key line in the entire article. He fully supports Ukraine in a, quote, terrible war that must be seen successfully to its conclusion. So there's no change between Boris and Truss and Sunak. That's the big takeaway from this article. Quote, at the moment, we see no grounds for hope that there will be any positive changes in the foreseeable future, unquote, says Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov. So we're staying the course, even though there's a change in leadership, and that's the headline from this particular article. We're going to turn our attention to American politics, and progressive Democrats retract Biden Ukraine letter after furious debate. Dramatic U-turn from the Progressive Caucus, withdrawing the letter sent to U.S. President urging talks to end the war in Ukraine. Now, we just talked the other day about McCarthy talking about how we just don't have a blank check. Now, there's within the conservative ranks, there's a kind of Reagan Republican. That's where I am. Okay, I'm a conservative Republican. I'm sorry if that bothers you, and if it does, I'm sorry. This is who I am. I'm all in on Ukraine, and I hope that you are too. I'm a conservative Republican, and then there's a Trump wing. Beyond the Reagan Republicans, there's a Trump wing that tends toward isolationism. They're not all like that, but there's a fraction of them that have that isolationist bent. Okay, so we talked about that just a few days ago. But within the Democrat Party in the United States, there's also a liberal wing, which is what Democrats were historically, and then there's a smaller progressive wing, which has different focuses, and they also are not all in on Ukraine. And this is a kind of an interesting thing. The chair of the Progressive Caucuses of the U.S. House of Representatives has retracted a letter sent by 30 of the members urging Joe Biden to engage in direct talks with Russia to end the war in Ukraine, following a heated debate within the Democratic Party. Now, again, there's a debate within the Democratic Party. The Democrats have largely been all in on this, just like Republicans have mostly been all in on this. In a statement issued on Tuesday afternoon, they made a dramatic U-turn, scrapping the letter that had been sent to the White House the previous day. They were, so I think what happened, and I don't know this, but I think the leadership got a hold of him and said, "What are you doing? You're really doing some damage here. Don't you know the Republicans just made a screwed up error here by saying this statement over here, and now you're giving them ammunition to hit you with?" That's my speculation. I don't know. I'm just saying it's. I think the leadership is taking them to task. The letter sent yesterday has been conflated with the GOP opposition to the support for Ukraine, Ukraine's just defense of their national sovereignty. And it goes on, perhaps the most controversial aspect of the letter was the proposal that Biden should explore, quote, incentives to end hostilities, including some form of sanctions relief for Russia. Okay, so again, the progressive wing, there is this wing that is not really all in. They want to see other things change within the U.S. just like the Republicans do, and so they're focused on, like, let's get done with this so we can do what we want to do. The original letter was signed by several of the most prominent left-wing Democrats in the House, including the so-called squad of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, and Rashida Tlaib. Okay, Jamie Raskin, it goes on. The White House responded by repeating Biden's central approach that Ukraine will decide for itself when and how to negotiate with Russia. Okay, I show you that, and I show you that to show you that the Republicans are not monolithic, the Democrats are not monolithic, but both parties are actually still pretty much in favor of supporting Ukraine. I'm showing you this also because even when what happens in about 2 weeks, the Republicans will take the Congress. They'll take at least the House, probably the Senate. Not much is going to change, so don't worry about that if you're overseas. What that means is that they can't really pass a lot of laws, but Biden still has the ability to do Lend-Lease. The Republicans will probably still support in a large measure what's going on because there's as many Reagan Republicans as there are, if not more, than Trump Republicans who are isolationists. Remember, the Trump Republicans even are split because some are still in that category of no, Russia needs to be pushed back and not eligible to do this. And the other wing of the Trump Republicans are kind of, it's not so much, it's not our business, it's just, Europe, you got to step up. This is your backyard. You've got to do it. So, okay. I belabored that long enough. Here's the actual article, or the actual letter itself. Here's Congress of the United States. Dear Mr. President, we write with whatever. For this reason, we urge you to pair the military and economic support the United States has provided Ukraine with a proactive diplomatic push, redoubling efforts to seek a realistic framework for a ceasefire. This is consistent with your recognition that there is going to have to be a negotiated settlement here, and your concern that Vladimir Putin does not have a way out right now, and I'm trying to figure out what to do about that. And again, so they're pushing for that negotiation, and here are the signatures of those progressive members like Ocasio and Omar and others. Okay, so that, I just want you to understand the reality of where it is. Neither Republicans nor Democrats are monolithic, but I think there's still enough support for Ukraine that it's not something that I would worry about. Okay, what are dirty bombs and why is Russia talking about them? So the article defines it, but what is Russia up to? Vladimir Putin's aim appears to be to get the West talking about how a dirty bomb could be used and what that would mean, much in the same way that Moscow hints about using tactical nuclear weapons. And then it's a really amazing thing. Deterrence has worked, but it has been Russia deterring us rather than the U.S. deterring Russia. So it's really bizarre how this has worked. And he's using this masterfully with this discussion of dirty bombs, just like he did with tactical nuclear weapons and nuclear weapons before that. The Kremlin has a long history of using breaches of international norms, assassinations, invasions, war crimes in Syria to gauge likely future responses by the West. So what this is, if I'm reading this right, is a trial balloon to see how will the U.S. react if we start talking about dirty bombs. Moscow has failed to prevent Western countries sending modern weapons and systems to Ukraine, but fear of its response has succeeded in making Washington and others hold back longer-range weapons. So what if all this talk is just to see if they can get the U.S. to pull back and not give the weapons that they have been giving Ukraine? And I think there may very well be something to that's part of what's going on. It also makes me a little nervous when Russia is talking about what Ukraine is doing, like Ukraine's preparing this dirty bomb or whatever, because that's how Russia operates. They blame whoever is, their opponent is, for doing what they're about to do. So that also makes me nervous, but I hope that this article is right and I'm wrong. I mean, I want to be wrong here. I want to think that they're just setting up a trial balloon. Okay. Now it's time for fun with Russian state media. Now, think back to all the articles that we just talked about and then think about how Russian media plays it. Take this article. UK's new Prime Minister Sunak admits Ukraine conflict must be stopped. Wait, was that what he said? Because what I heard was something very different, but here's how it's carried in Pravda. This is pravda.ru. Ukrainian conflict must be stopped, UK's new PM Sunak said in his first speech as Prime Minister. And they carry this. Sunak said that the Ukraine conflict was a terrible war that must be seen successfully to its conclusion. Okay, but that's not in the spirit of it. What he was saying is we have to make sure that the Russians are beaten, and that's not what this sounds like here. On 25 October, King Charles III confirmed Sunak's accession to the post of Prime Minister, and then the rest is just a little bit of filler. But wow, the way that this is, it must be stopped. He's not saying that at all, but this is how it's carried. Okay. Next article, and we just talked about this with the squad. U.S. congressman urged Joe Biden to sit down and talk to Russia. Okay, as many as 30 members of the U.S. House of Representatives from the left wing of the Democratic Party in Congress signed a letter to Biden. Liberal Democrats note that the catastrophic effect of the crisis in Ukraine has spread far beyond Ukraine's borders. Prices on food and gas continue to rising in the United States. Now, they did talk about that in the letter. I mean, this is legitimate. But it wasn't the main point. And the main point was not, okay, so the letter was giving them some propaganda value, but then they also backed off of it because the leadership kind of probably took them in a back room and, don't do that. That's a very bad strategy for us politically. It's going to hurt us. John Kirby, strategic communication coordinator, noted, however, that negotiations were impossible because Kyiv was not ready for them yet. Okay, so again, see how Pravda and RT and others spin this. Here's an RT article. U.S. doubles down on dirty bomb denial. Huh? What? Dirty bomb denial. U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin has rejected Moscow's warnings about Kyiv's alleged plans to deploy a dirty bomb to frame Russia. The Pentagon chief spoke with Minister of Defense Alexei Reznikov to, quote, reaffirm the unwavering U.S. commitment and support Ukraine's ability to counter Russian aggression. Now, over the last couple of days, we did talk about that same kind of thing. Like Sergei Shoigu said something to his counterparts, and the U.S. and France and U.K. were like, that's not true. Okay. On Monday, Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesman, warned that the threat from Ukraine is evident, adding that the West's disbelief does not mean that the threat ceases to exist. Okay, but Russia's lie does not mean that it actually is going to happen. Okay, Russia has already warned high-ranking officials from Turkey, the U.S., the U.K., and France about the possibility of a nuclear incident. All of them, except Ankara, refuted what they called the, quote, blatantly false allegations, unquote, adding that this, quote, should not be used as a pretext for greater escalation. Okay, so that's how they spin these articles. And that's why I do this segment on Fun with Russian State Media, because you need to be informed, because you're the kind of person, and thank you for being the kind of person who cares about Ukraine. See you tomorrow.